Hi everyone, I am CA Surbhi Punshi, Indirect Tax Expert at ClearTax, and today we gathered here to understand about the last date for claiming ITC. So we are going to understand about all the changes which was recently introduced by the government. We'll also talk about like what if you don't claim ITC, what will happen for that particular ITC. We'll also talk about little bit about nine thing. We'll even talk about some amendment and the practical difficulties which we face today. But before we even start our today's session, I just want to check if you all are able to hear me or not. So if you are able to hear me, just say hi on the chat box. Great. So it seems like everyone is able to hear me. So with this, we'll just start our today's session on the last date for claiming ITC, and we all know that it's already here. And as per the new changes, this last date is 30th of November. But what exactly that means, we should understand that in detail because that's very important. That's very necessary. So let's talk about all of that changes. So here, if we just talk about the first thing, when we talk about availing the pending ITC, we know there was a recent notification which was being issued, and there we clearly mentioned that the due date has been extended till 30th November. But what exactly that means is a really important point while we are claiming ITC for FY 21-22. So right now I'm more focused on FY 21-22 because for that there is a last date which is 30th November. I'm not focused on anything related to the ITC which is related to the current year, because for that anyhow we have a time, we can always claim the pending ITC. But when it comes to FY 21-22, there is a last date which is 30th November. But now when we are saying that the last date for claiming ITC is 30th November, is that actually true, or how are exactly we are going to use it? So if you ask me today, right, like, see, we can claim ITC till 30th November, but we claim ITC while we file GSTR 3B, right? That's the only way that we claim ITC today. So if I'm claiming ITC while I'm filing my GSTR 3B, so there is also a due date for filing my GSTR 3B. And the due date for filing my GSTR 3B for the month of October 2022 is 20th of November, right? 20th of November. So, which means ultimately, when I have to claim any pending ITC, I have to claim that in my GSTR 3B form. And if I have to claim that in my GSTR 3B form, I should file my 3B on time, which is by 20th of November. So, ultimately, I should say that the due date or the last date for me on for claiming any ITC is 20th of November and not the 30th November. Unless I decide that I am okay paying the late fees to the government. If I'm okay paying late fees to the government, that okay, I want to file delay in making or filing my GSTR 3B. If I want to do that delay and I'm okay paying that late fees, which is today, if we look into it, at 50 rupees per day. So if I'm okay with that, then the due date for me becomes 30th November. Otherwise, if you ask me, for me, if I want to be compliant, I don't want to pay any late fees, I don't want to pay any interest. The last date for me, if I'm a monthly filer for claiming any pending ITC related to FY 21-22, becomes 20th of November. So that's the one important factor which we should understand, that if there is some pending ITC which was reflecting in my GST 2B and still I have not claimed the ITC and I was eligible to claim ITC, better you claim it now. So here, this is about the pending ITC. Now, what about the quarterly filers? So if you are the quarterly filers who was filing your GSTR 3B on the quarterly basis, for that the last date was, again, you have to file that in your GSTR 3B. And when you file in your GSTR 3B, it is a quarter ended September, right? So the last date for you to claim ITC was quarter ended September, which is already gone. If you have still not filed your GSTR 3B for the quarter ended September, then you can actually file that return till 30th of November and you will be allowed to claim any ITC which was related to FY 21-22. So this was about claiming of any pending ITC. So in short, if you ask me today, I would obviously say that prepare your GSTR 9 now itself. All the adjustment, right? You do a proper reconciliation between your purchase registered and your GSTR 2B and your GSTR 3B. do a reconciliation, and if you find that okay, there was some ITC which is related to FY 21-22 and you have not claimed ITC till date, claim it now. Because in GST 9 you cannot claim ITC. So GST 9 is not a form for claiming any pending ITC. If you have to claim it, you have to claim it now, right? And even if there are suppliers, your suppliers, where you feel that there were certain purchase invoices and you are not able to claim ITC because it's not reflecting in your GST, to be better you inform to your supplier now itself, so that before they file their GST 1, because ultimately they are going to file their GST 1 by 11th of this month, which means by 11th of November they are going to file their GST 1. Inform them now itself so that this invoice gets reflected in your GST 2B, and accordingly you become eligible to claim that ITC, right? So this is one important factor which we should understand, that you should avail all the pending ITC related to your FY 21-20 now in this October return period itself, because if you don't do that, then you won't be able to claim this ITC and it will be kind of a lapsed ITC for your FY 21-22. Now we have claimed, let's assume we have claimed all the ITC which was pending. Now the second important part is the extension of the time limit for any amendments and all, right? We keep on saying that, hey, I actually have to receive some invoices, and maybe sometime I even get a complaint from our customer, that customer says, hey, I had purchased some invoice from you, but I'm not able to see that invoice in my GST 2B. What you're going to do in such case, right? So the main reason why they are not able to see that particular invoice could be that you have mentioned the wrong customer GSTN. That could be one reason. Second reason is maybe you have uploaded that as a B2C rather than a B2B document. So many times while we were filing GST 1, we didn't have the correct GSTN number, the correct customer GSTN. So we just deleted it, uploaded it as a B2C summary and filed our GST 1. So we have paid the correct liability, but since this was not shown as a B2B document, or maybe a wrong customer GSTN was mentioned, that recipient, that customer was not able to see this invoice, right? Which means we had made a mistake while we were filing our GST 1. In the same way, there can be a possibility that I could not see the ITC. Maybe my supplier say, hey, I've already filed the correct amount in my GST 1, but I'm not able to see it. So the reason could be the same thing applies to supplier also. And for the supplier, again, the same reason, that he might have given the wrong customer GSTN number. Or many times there can also be a case that maybe the time he was doing, the GSTN was showing as an invalid, or maybe the department, because we also understand sometimes they just suspend the GSTN number. So temporarily they have suspended. At that time they would have shown it as a B2C, but actually it was a B2B document. So I was not able to see that ITC in my GST 2B. So these are some of the reasons when I'm not able to claim my ITC, or my customer is not able to claim my ITC. So again, for this, especially for FY 21-22, earlier this due date used to be till my September ka return period. Now this has again been extended till 30th of November. So we know that when it comes to amendment or even the additions, if I forgot to report any invoice in my GST 1, I can add that invoice also. I can do that only till my October return period. Why I'm saying again October return period over here? So though the due date has been extended till 30th November, but still we know that all amendments, additions, if I have to make, I can do that only in my GST 1. And if I can do that only in my GST 1, so GST 1 filing due date for the month of October is 11th of November. So if I don't file my GST 1 by 11th of November, then there are two problems here. First problem. See, even if I can make an amendment, assume that I have made an amendment in my GST 1 for the month of October, but let's assume that I have done this amendment and I filed my GST 1 for the month of October on 15th of November. So if I file my GST 1 on 15th of November, the bigger problem comes in that the customer, right? Ultimately, my customer also have to claim ITC. That person should be able to see this invoice in their GST 2B. And they will never be able to see this GST 2B में that particular invoice for the return period, right? While now they download their GST 2B for the month of October, they will not be able to see this invoice if I have delayed in filing my GST 1 for the month of the October, where that invoice which was related to FY 2021 was there. I will just repeat it. Let's assume I had done some B2B amendment while I was filing my October ka return. I could not file my October return by 11th, which is by 11th of November. I have not filed my GST1. I filed my GST1 on, let's say, 15th, right? I filed on 15th of November. Can I file? So let me first ask you this question. Can I file my GST1 for the month of October on 15th November? Maybe you can answer on the chat box. Can I file my GST1 on 15th of November? I have made some amendments. I have done some B2BA giving a reference to any invoice which was for my FY 21-22. Can I file my GST1 on 15th of November? Will government allow that? So I could see there is an answer from everyone. Himanshu says yes, Atul says yes, Kajal says yes, Rajesh says yes, Rahul says yes, Ashok. So everyone is saying yes, we can do that. And the answer is yes, I can file GST1 an amendment. I can file B2B amendment in my GST1 for the month of October return period for the document which was related to my FY 21-22. I can do that. There won't be any problem. It's just I have to pay a late fees, right? There would be a late fees will be applicable, which will be 50 rupees. I'm assuming it's not a nil return. So it will be 50 rupees per day. I have to just pay a late fees. Now my second question is, okay, I was able to file my GST1 on 15. Whether that B2BA invoice, that amendment invoice which I have filed, which was related to FY 21-22, whether my recipient or the customer will be able to see this invoice in their GST2B for the month of October or not. So here I have filed my return. I filed on 15th of November for the October return period, whether this particular person, the customer, will be able to see this invoice or not. And I could see the answer from Sharvana says no, M says no, Kajal says no, Vishal says no, Himanshu says no, Vijay says no. Okay, Sonal, Sharvana, everyone is saying no. And which is the correct answer? The customer will never be able to see this invoice where I have uploaded this invoice. I have filed so I uploaded in the October return period itself, but I filed this on 15th. So in October 2B, they will never be able to see this invoice. They will be able to see this invoice only in the next month. So now when this customer downloads their GST2B for the month of November, right? And they will be able to download this 2B for the month of November on 14th of December. So on 14th December, whenever they download their GST2B for the month of November, there they will be able to see this invoice. But now the bigger problem comes in. Even if they would be able to see this particular invoice, this particular invoice will be shown as ITC not available. Why it will be shown as ITC not available? Because as per section 16, if the supplier has filed this after the due date, right, which is 30th of November in this particular example. So since this particular was filed after due date, they will never be able to claim this ITC. And in short, if you ask me, right, in general also, when this recipient was never able to see this invoice in 2B, they will never be able to claim ITC. For them, the time period for claiming ITC itself was, if you just see, right, itself was 30th of November. But they were able to see this invoice only on 14th of December. So since they were able to see this invoice only on 14th of December, they will never be able to claim ITC. So this is a repercussion of us. So we should always not look into the date that, okay, it is 30th November, I can make any amendments, adjustments afterward. You should always look into the time period when I can even file my return. Right? So this is like another important point which we should understand. Now, I just talked about due date side. Let me also ask, because there we just talk about October. But if, let's talk about September return period itself. I filed my GST1 for the month of September on 1st December, or maybe let's say October only. October return period, right? October return period, I said that October return period, you can do any amendment which was related to FY 21-22. That is what I said. In the October 2022 return period, I can make any amendments which was related to my FY 21-22. My question to all of you is that, let's say I filed this return for the month of October on 1st December. Whether government will allow me to do this amendments on 1st December, which was related to my FY 21-22. I could see answer from Pathvi says no, Sona says no, Ganesh says no, Atul says no, Sharvana, Rajesh, everyone is saying no. And that's the right answer. So which means the relevance of this 30th November becomes important, that when are you actually filing your GST1? So if you try to file GST1, whether you are filing the GST1 for the month of September or October, right? If you are filing this GST1 on 1st of December, government will not allow you to do any amendments. And there is another major reason also why the government won't allow, right? If you look into GST 9 also, in GST 9 there is one table 8A. There is a table 8A of GST 9, and you know that value has to be freezed there, and that is actually dependent on 2B, and that also takes the impact of this amendments adjustments which you are doing, right? So here that will never be get freezed unless this amendment, there is a freezing date for this. So the government have to keep a freezing date so that that also get freeze, and accordingly you even file your GST9, right? So if you ask me today, should I start preparing my GST9 today, I would say yes, you should prepare your GST9 today. But should you file your GST9 today, I would say no, wait, better see, unless you know that all your ITC which you have like there, and every ITC which was there in the PR was also reflecting in 2B and you have claimed it perfectly, you should go with that. But where you see that there are suppliers who are making some adjustments, amendments and all, better you wait till 2nd of December. Once that is updated, the table 8 is updated, then only you should go and file your GST9. So you should prepare it, but filing you should do on 2nd or maybe after 1st of December once your 8A of GST9 gets updated. Right? So this was of the extension of this time limit, right? There is a time period for that. But again, when we are saying this time limit, we should also look into the filing date for the GST1, and we should also think from the customer angle, right? That is also the another important perspective we should always consider while we are looking into this. So it should not be only, okay, I can do an amendment, let me do on, let's say 30th of November, let me file on 30th of November. Yes, you can do that amendment. There is no problem. But there is also problem from the customer angle. Let's give another example of that B2C to B2B, right? Many times we say that, okay, while I was filing my GST1, I didn't have a proper customer GST. I reported, I paid the liability to the government, and I showed that as a B2C document. But my customer, obviously, he said, hey, my GST correct GST number is this at a later stage, and he asked me to update as a B2B. Can I do that? Answer is yes. I can always file a B2C as amendment, and I can put a normal B2B document. So I can always do that. There is no problem. But again, there is a time limit for that. You should do till on time, because if you don't do, then the customer will never be able to claim the ITC. So that liability, if there was some liability which you have not paid, you can even do in GST9. There is no problem. But the problem is that the customer will never be able to see this invoice if it is a B2B invoice. And it's always suggested that if there is some adjustments, amendments, additions, anything, right, you should always do that through GST1 or GST3B. You should not directly do that in GST9 ka form. So it's always good that you do a proper reconciliation now itself, which is a reconciliation between your GST1, 3B and the books. You should do it now. Do the reconciliation between 2B, 3B and the books also now itself. And accordingly, right, once you have done all this reconciliation, accordingly, you should go ahead and make the adjustments in your GST1 or maybe your GST3B. So wherever it is required, you should do that adjustments in the October return period itself. Right? So this was about the extension. Now, in the same way, when it comes to credit note, we also have the credit notes, right? Again, when we look into this line, when they said that, hey, now you can actually issue the credit note, right? Earlier, the date used to be till September, right? Following the end of the financial year. Now, this has been extended to 30th November. I will now again say another important part, that if there is any supply which was related to FY 21-22 and you are raising a credit note against that particular supply, there is a due date for that, that you can raise any credit note in relation to the supply for FY 21-22 till 30th of November. But question is whether that means that the credit note date can be 30th of November. Let me ask you this question. There was a supply which was made, let's say you had raised one invoice on 31st March 2022. There was a goods which you have sent, you have also raised an invoice, and there was, then after that, let's say there was a good, let's say there was a defect in that goods, right? And the customer asked me to raise a credit note. So now my question is, can I raise that credit note on 30th of November 2022 in relation to the supply which was for FY 21-22? Can I raise a credit note on 30th of November 2022 or not? I could see different answers. M says no, Srinivasan says yes, Umesh says no, Himanshu says no, Patrick says no, Rahul says yes, Deepa says no. Arun says no. Okay, most of you are saying no, and still I'm getting a mixed answers over here. So see here, I will again tell you one important part. When you raise a credit note, you reduce your liability, right? Whenever you're raising a credit note, you reduce your liability. And obviously, I'm assuming because you have to reduce the liability. If in case you are talking about the financial credit note, you can raise anytime. There is no problem because it's not going to anyhow impact the government, right? Because you're not reducing your liability. But now see, when it comes to the customer also, think about there was a sale of, let's say you have made a sale of 100 rupees. Let's say the tax amount was 100 rupees. When there was an ITC amount of the 100 rupees in that particular example, the customer, right? Customer said that, hey, I received only the goods worth rupees 80 rupees, 20 was defective. You raise a credit note for 20. That is what that person is going to say. You would have discharged the liability of 100 rupees, right? Customer would have claimed the ITC of only 80 rupees because one another condition for claiming the ITC was that you should have received the goods and the services. Because a person have received goods only for 80 rupees because other 20 was defective which they have returned. So in that particular case, from the customer angle, they're going to claim only 80 rupees, right? There was no problem there. Now question is, from your angle, you are going to reduce this liability because customer anyhow has not claimed ITC, so you will only reduce your liability. The thing is, my question was whether you can raise a credit note dated 30th November. Assume you have done that. Assume that you have raised a credit note on 30th of November, reducing your liability. If you do that, when are you going to report this credit note? In which return you are going to even show this particular credit note? You would say, okay, I will report that in my November return period because on 30th of November, I have issued this credit note. If you have raised a credit note on 30th of November, this particular recipient will be able to see this credit note only in the next return, which will be in the month of like December, right? On 14th December, whenever they generate 2B, they will be able to see that. Is that even a right thing? Is it even related to FY 21-22? The answer will be no. So here again, when we are saying this issuance of the credit note, this credit note should be till your October ka return period, so that you show this credit note in the October return period itself, and accordingly this gets reflected in the GSTR 2B also. Right, so wherever you're reducing the liability in relation to FY 21-22, you should do all the adjustment till October return period, so that ultimately this credit note also gets reflected in your October return period, rather than this credit note getting reflected in the next month, because then it is not related to your FY 21-22, right? So this supply is not related to your FY 21-22. So this is one another important point which we should again understand, that whenever the government is saying 30th November in relation to the declaration of the credit note, so you should empathize on the word declaration over here, right? They're talking about declaration. See, you can do the declaration till 30th November. That does not mean that the issuance date should also be 30th November. So issuance date should fall in the October return period itself, though you can always you can declare this credit note till your 30th of November. So this is like another important point which we should understand while we are talking about the declaration of the credit note in terms of our GST1 filing, right? So till this, I hope every point is clear, and you can keep on raising any of the queries which you have on the chat box. So we'll keep on taking all the queries. So I will be taking queries also, and anyhow at the end of the session, we'll take all the queries. So you can keep on posting your queries on the chat box. Now the another part was due date of rectification in GSTR 3B. So as we said, in GSTR 1 we can make rectification. Obviously in 3B also I can claim ITC. I can even make rectification. Let's say I paid less liability. Can I add a liability in 3B? Yes, obviously you can do that. I paid extra liability. Can I raise now a credit note and I can adjust some liability? You can always do that. Now, again, the timeline for doing any adjustment which was related to FY 21-22 in GSTR 3B is also 30th November. but same point applies here also. When I'm saying 30th November, it is till October return period, and October return period you can file till 20th of November. So we should always consider the date as 20th of November. If you assume that you are a compliant person, you don't want to end up paying late fees or the interest, is always good that you file the date like this GSTR 3B for the month of October by 20th November and claim on any pending ITC, do any rectification, any adjustments which was related to FY 21-22 till that particular date. Though it's not like, so if you have seen, right, many times department also raise the notices, right? So they keep on raising the notices and they says, I will give you one practical example over here. There was a case when there was a like, let's say there was a taxpayer who filed his March return. Obviously, when we're saying, let's assume there was a taxpayer and you only have to answer me, right? Looking into this new provisions and all, and this was a case which was related to last year. So I'm going to give you a case. Let's assume after this new provision, you tell me if that is a valid case or not, and whether this assessing officer should not allow the ITC or should allow the ITC as per the provision or whatever we have discussed till now. So you only answer me this. Let's say there is a taxpayer who filed his March 2022 GSTR 3B on 1st of December 2022. There is a taxpayer filed his GSTR 3B for the month of March 2022 on 1st of December 2022. And he had also claimed an ITC of 1 lakh rupees in that GSTR 3B. My question to all of you, whether this ITC will be allowed to this taxpayer who has delayed in filing his GSTR 3B for the month of March 2022 and has filed this return on 1st of December 2022. I could see the answer from Deepa says no, Umesh says no, Rahul says no, Brajesh says no, Murali says no, Somna says no. Everyone is saying no, and that's the right answer. So here the supplier, this taxpayer, they have, I would say taxpayer, right? So here taxpayer has delayed in filing his GSTR 3B for the month of March, so he will not be allowed to claim that ITC which was there, because the timeline for claiming any ITC for FY 21-22 was your 30th November. And if you don't file your GSTR 3B till 30th of November, the government is not going to allow you the ITC also. And this was kind of a notice which one of the even assessing. In fact, in some of the state, the AOF actually started raising the notices in the case, and that time still the date was 30th of September, right? So earlier it used to be like not 30th September, I would say September ka due date, so which used to be 20th of October or 22nd of October. So if there are people who have filed this GSTR 3B for like March or maybe Feb after that date, so the department actually have raised the notice and disallowed that ITC. And not only disallowing the ITC, they also clearly said, hey, now you pay the interest also, because they had used that ITC against the liability which was shown in 3B. So you have to think about all of this thing, that here not only claiming ITC, filing your GSTR 3B on time also becomes very necessary, right? But anyhow, nowadays if you ask me, if you don't file your GSTR 3B for the continuously 3 return period, right, the department itself suspends your GSTR number. So that is how they take care of this situation. But earlier it was not there, so that time the department was actually issuing the notice. Now the another part was reversal of ITC with interest if the supplier does not pay taxes and the reavailment thereof. So we all understand that there is a condition here that you have to reverse your ITC in case you have not made the payment to your vendors within 180 days, right? We all understand. Now the important part is that you also have to claim that ITC back, right? So it's always good that if there was some payment which you had not made to your supplier and now you have already made the payment to that supplier, so better you now reclaim that ITC. So this is another important part, that where we have where we have not claimed it, you reavail it. Where you have not reversed the ITC, better you reverse that ITC, and along with the interest you should always do that, right? Now one important part which we should again understand, though this is not relevant for this particular date, but this is relevant in general, that this is something where we had a lot of confusion earlier. So we know that because of the place of supply, so there was a different opinion, that some people say that, okay, wherever my state, like my GSTN does not match with the place of supply which is mentioned by the supplier, In that case, you cannot claim ITC. Some people says you can claim ITC. So there was a lot of dispute in the market, right? So a very simple example I will give you here. Let's assume that I am in the state of Karnataka. I am registered in the state of Karnataka. I visited Delhi, and in Delhi I stayed in a hotel. When I stayed in a hotel, I gave them my GST, which is for the Karnataka state, right? That hotelier raised me an invoice. That person gave me that invoice, and that person charged CGST, SGST. Because we all understand, in case of the immobile property, the place of the supply is the state where that immobile property is situated, right? So that supplier, actually that the person, right, the hotelier, they have charged place of supply. They have clearly shown place of supply is Delhi, and they charge CGST, HGST, because that supplier was also in Delhi, and the place of supply, as per the place of supply provision, was also Delhi, so they charge CGST, HGST. I received this, right? I received this invoice. I was also able to see this invoice in my GSTR 2B. But since I received this in the Karnataka state, right? Here the place of supply mentioned by the supplier was Delhi. I received in Karnataka. There is a mismatch between the state here. So this is considered as an ineligible category, or the ITC not available as per GSTR 2B. So whenever you look into this invoice in your GSTR 2B, you will always see that there is a mismatch, and the government populate this as a not ITC not available. So I cannot claim ITC on this. So this is another important point which we should understand, and this is now clearly mentioned in section 16 also, that you cannot claim ITC if it is in the restricted category of GSTR 2B. So in such cases, we should not claim ITC. If you have claimed it, better you reverse it. So ultimately, you will end up paying interest on that if you have even utilized that, right? So this is like one another part which we should again understand. And again, I will give you another example. So today when we even file GSTR 9, right? So while we are filing GSTR 9, we would have seen 8A of GSTR 9, table 8 of GSTR 9, right? In table 8 of GSTR 9 also, government never considered that ITC, which is ITC not available as per GSTR 2B. So they never considered that. So this is another part which we should understand. If you have claimed it, you should just reverse it and also pay the interest on top of it. Now the next part is about the interest of 18% only on the ITC wrongly availed and utilized. I think this is something just for your knowledge purpose also, and because while you're filing GSTR 9, right, it also becomes important that if there is some pending interest which you have to pay, you just pay it off or you just discharge it off. So here, what exactly this means, I will give you one example and you only answer me what would happen in this case. Think about, you had a GSTR 3B, you have to file GSTR 3B. You had a liability, let's say in that particular month, let's say you're filing your GSTR 3B for the month of September. You had no liability in that particular month. You had no supply, you have not sold anything, nothing was there. You had a zero liability, right? There was an ITC, right? There was an ITC of 1 lakh rupees. And what you have done while you were filing your GSTR 3B, in GSTR 3B, you have claimed that ITC of 1 lakh rupees. But actually that 1 lakh rupees which you have claimed, and I actually have started receiving answer also. So that ITC, that 1 lakh rupees which I have claimed in my GSTR 3B, in that ITC, I realized that I was eligible only for 40,000. I was not eligible for 1 lakh rupees, right? So I have wrongly claimed that ITC of 60,000. My question to all of you, I was filing my GSTR 3B for the month of September. There was no tax liability at all. I claimed that ITC of 1 lakh rupees instead of just 40,000 rupees. I was eligible only for 40,000 rupees, but I claimed that ITC of 1 lakh rupees. My question to you is whether in this particular transaction, the interest will be charged on me or not. I could see answer from Rajesh says yes. Himanshu says you can reverse ITC of 60,000 without interest. Ganesh says yes. Sumesh says yes. Savannah says yes. Deepa says no. Sanjay says yes. Srinivasan says no. Rahul says no. Right, so I actually am getting a mixed answers over here. Some people says yes, some people says no. So now here I will tell you one simple thing. In this particular example which I gave, right, September month, the ITC of 1 lakh rupees was there in my electronic credit ledger, right? ITC of 1 lakh rupees was there in my electronic credit ledger because I have shown that amount in my GSTR 3B. still there won't be any interest. There will be no interest charged on this transaction, because in that month there was no liability at all, and I have not utilized that 1 lakh rupees which is sitting in my electronic credit ledger in that month, since I had no liability. So since I had no liability, I have not utilized that, and since I have not utilized that 1 lakh of balance, that 1 lakh balance was sitting as it is in my electronic credit ledger. So in this particular case, interest will not be charged, right? So we don't have to charge in this case the interest because it was not utilized. So here the another important part I will always say that, see, the government most of the time, right, if you pay extra, it's very difficult for you to get that money back from the department. So it's always good that while you are even calculating the interest, you should always calculate the interest on that amount which has also been utilized. If it is not utilized, which means that balance was still sitting in your electronic credit ledger, in that particular case you are not liable to pay any interest, so you should not calculate the interest on this transaction, right? So this was another important point which we should always keep in our mind while we are even discharging for any interest payment, right? If there was some ITC where you have done the reversal, let's say because of 180 days transition and all, right? So if you have done some ITC reversal and you have forget to claim ITC, you can just claim the ITC now itself. Similarly, if there was some reverse charge transaction, many times what happened that we would have paid our liability under the reverse charge. So there is 3.1D, right? In GST 3B, we have a table called 3.1D. In 3.1D, we show the liability which is related to reverse charge. So again, you just make sure that whether the ITC against the same has already been claimed or not. So in table number 3AC, right? Sorry, I would say in table number 4AC of GSTR 3B, you can always claim the ITC in relation to the reverse charge or import of services, right? So for that, you just claim the ITC in table number 4. So if you have missed claiming any ITC in FY 21-22, better you claim it now only, so that accordingly you can even show that information in your GSTR 9 for FY 21-22. So you should always keep all liability, all ITC related to one particular financial year at a one place, right? So if something has been missed out in for claiming the ITC related to reverse charge, you should do it now itself. Now the another part is, many times this always happens, and I will give you one fair normal example, right? Practically, many times what happens in your GST 2B, when you look into it, right, there could be some bank transactions also. The bank would have charged some bank charges and all. They would have even charged GST on top of that. And when they would have charged GST on top of that, that is actually reflecting in your GST 2B. But when you look into your purchase register, many times we don't even record the ITC of that bank charges, because whenever we are doing bank reconciliation, I saw some entry in my bank statement. I like, okay, this is the bank charges. You directly put that as an expenses as a bank charges. We never show that ITC in our books of account. When we don't show, and accordingly we have not even claimed in our GSTR 3B, this is some kind of an ITC which is missed. Because if you ask me, can I claim the ITC on the bank charges? The answer is yes. I can always claim the ITC on the bank charges. So if it is reflecting in your GSTR 3B, better you just claim that ITC now itself, which is related to FY 21-22. So if you have missed claiming, if the proper entry was not there in your books of account, better you make an entry also in your books of account and claim the pending ITC related to FY 21-22 related to bank charges. And it could be not only bank charges, there can be other small mini expenses also, which is done for your business purpose, right? There you can actually claim ITC. So it's better you just cross check all the purchase bill with your GST 2B, and accordingly if there is some missed ITC, you just claim it now, right? Similarly, if there is some sales reversed, right, and you have not properly shown your credit note, better you show the credit note also now, because if you missed showing any credit note in relation to the supply which was for FY 21-22, after that you will never be able to do that. You will never be able to reverse your tax amount there, right? You will never be able to reduce your liability over there. It's always good that if there was some sale which has been reversed after the GST is paid, you just show the credit note while you are filing your October return, which is in relation to the supply for FY 21-22. In the same way, if you have some small expenses like internet bill, telephone bills, right, there again, if there was some tax amount charged and no proper entry was made, you make the entry properly now itself and accordingly claim that ITC. Right? So this is some of the important point which we should understand while we are filing our GSTR 3B and GSTR 1 for the month of October 2022, because it becomes really very important, especially when we look into FY 21-22, because this is the last time when you can do any amendments, any adjustments, any ITC pending, ITC claiming, any reversal for FY 21-22. So you should file your October return period very carefully and do all the adjustments now itself. Right? Now, if you ask me, for doing all adjustments, what kind of reconciliation you should ideally run? So these are the kind of reconciliation we should done so that all adjustments can be done on time, which is your reconciliation between your 1, sales registered, and 3B, the reconciliation between your 2A, 2B, 3B, and the books of account, the reconciliation between e-way bill 1 and 3B, reconciliation between e-invoicing 1 and books, reconciliation between your 26 AS and also your GSTR 3B. So these are some of the reconciliation which we should also do, and accordingly make a documentation. Even if there is a difference, see, many times there can be actually a difference, right? There can always be a differences between e-way bill data and the GST one. The reason why, because we know e-way bill are not going to generate for every kind of transaction, right? Let's say maybe e-way bill I'm generating for delivery challan, but maybe in GST one we never report delivery challan. There can be differences. It's okay to have differences, but it's important that you know why there is a difference, right? So there would be difference. You put a reason that this is a reason for differences. See, whenever we do the bank reconciliation also, we see a difference, but we also know why there's a difference. So here the important part is, after running a reconciliation, you should know why there's a difference, document it properly, so that tomorrow, after 2 years, 3 years, department, whenever they come up with a notice also, you have a proper documentation with you, and you can just say, hey, I know the reason, this is the reasons, I'm not liable to pay any interest on that, because this is a genuine reason why there's a differences. Right? One main reason, see, whenever you would have difference between 2B and 3B, definitely you are going to you are going to receive a notice. It's a very normal thing. But the important part comes in that you don't have to wait for them to raise a communication or the notice. You should now itself know that why there is a difference between these two. Am I actually claiming a right ITC or not? If you're claiming right ITC, you don't have to worry about it. But if there is a differences, you should note why there is a difference on that particular part. Right. I could see there's another question from Deepa, who is asking if RCM for FY 21-22 paid after 30th November, can we claim ITC on RCM paid in next year? Yes, Deepa, if you ask me, right, the liability to pay, right? So here, whenever you have raised the invoice, so I assume when you're paying this after 30th November, let's say 1st December, you're also raising the self invoice on 1st December. So if you're raising the self invoice also on 1st December, then you will be allowed to claim that ITC in respect of the reverse charge transaction. Another question from Yogendra, who is asking, how to claim ITC on custom duty? So Yogendra, we cannot claim the ITC on the custom duty. You can only claim that ITC on the IGST which you pay at the custom. So while you file that bill of entry, right, you also pay that IGST over there. That you can always claim in your GSTR 3B. But when you talk about custom duty, you can't claim. But yeah, that IGST which you have paid, you can always claim while you're filing your GSTR 3B. So that can always be claimed. Another question I could see from Monel, who is asking whether missed invoice for FY 21-22 needs to be accounted in the financial year before 31st October, as last month for claiming GST is October. Can we book vendors invoice in books in November? But there will be mismatch between books and GST. See, I will always suggest that you show it before itself, because ultimately your financial statement should also match, right? So your financial statement should match. So you should show it before and accordingly claim the ITC also. Another question I could see that from Shravan, who is asking, RCM paid in cash and utilized in the same month August, but RCM liability does not declare in mistake 3B August and RCM liability declare in September. In that case, whether interest will be applicable. So you are saying you have not paid the RCM liability, but you have claimed the ITC against the same, right? So if you have claimed that ITC, now again my question would be whether that ITC was utilized or not. So whether that RCM ITC which you have claimed was utilized against the liability other than RCM or not. If you say that you have already utilized that ITC also, in that case, yes, interest will be levied. In case you have not utilized that ITC against that other liability other than the RCM, in that particular case, so if it is utilized, then interest will be levied. If it is not utilized, then no interest will be levied in this transaction. Right. Now, the another important point which we should also look into it. See, we always keep on saying this should be there, that should be there, right? But sometimes when we do the audit, right, when we even close our books of account, this is some another important point which we should understand. So whenever there's a scrutiny and all, right, department actually asks for all these documents from you. So here we all understand when we talk about claiming of a ITC, another part is that you should have a valid tax invoice. When I'm saying you should have a valid tax invoice, in that particular case, the valid tax invoice will be considered only when there are the suppliers, your supplier, right? Whenever your supplier, they are required to generate invoice, which means invoice is applicable to them, and if they are not putting or mentioning the iron number of that particular invoice, in that case it is not considered as a valid invoice, right? Which means if you are purchasing something from the suppliers to whom invoicing is applicable, and if they are that particular supplier are not putting the item number and the QR code on that invoice, then that invoice will not be considered as a valid invoice. So for you it becomes really very important that whether the item number was present on that invoice or not, because if item number is not present, it is not considered a valid invoice, and if it is not a valid invoice, in that particular case you are not eligible to claim the ITC also, even if it was coming in your GST 2B. So this is one other important point which we should always understand. Similarly, if you're also maintaining the proper GRN and all, right, you should also make sure whether the goods and the services are actually received or not. If it is not received, then again you are not allowed to claim the ITC. You should also make sure whether that ITC is actually eligible or not. I gave you one example, right? The place of supply differences. Their ITC is not eligible, then you can't claim ITC. There can be another important like 17.5 conditions, right? All that 70 where you're paying membership fees, the personal expenses thing, let's say the foods and beverages for your employees and all that things you cannot claim ITC, right? So that is something which we should again understand. Then whether that invoice is actually appearing in your GST 2B or not. If that invoice is not appearing in GST 2B, again you're not allowed to claim that ITC, right? You should also follow up for the invoice, the missing invoices. So if you know that there was purchases which was made, but that supplier has not shown that invoice in their GST1, and accordingly you are not able to see that invoice in your GST 2B, again make sure you follow up with that supplier, because if you don't do that, right, ultimately there would also be a timeline for claiming ITC. You won't be able to claim ITC and it will be a lapsed ITC for you, right? So this is another part which we should again understand. Then one important part which most of us actually miss it, and I will tell you what exactly is this. Whenever we are making the taxable and the exempt supplies, when I'm saying whenever we are making taxable and exempt supplies, here let's say I'm into a pharma company, I'm selling some medicines, I'm also selling some cosmetic items. Assume medicines are exempt and cosmetic items are taxable. I have to reverse the common ITC every month, right? Every month I will reverse that common ITC, and not only that, after the year end I have to recalculate it and then accordingly adjust the, if there is a more ITC reverse, then claim it. If there is a less ITC reverse, then reverse that ITC. So this is something which we should understand. But from here, I will give you another example. Many of you say, okay, anyhow, I don't have to worry about. I only deal with a taxable item. I don't deal with the exempt item. So there also, please carefully look into your PL account, the credit side. See what all income are you receiving. See, I gave you one example. What happened that there was a sale of mutual funds. When there was a sale of mutual fund, my question to all of you is, there is a sale of mutual fund, which you have, the income from the sale of mutual fund you have shown in the PL account as an income, right? My question to you is, the sale of mutual fund, is it considered as an exempt supplies or not? As per GST, whether it's an exempt supplies or not, whether you have to pay GST on that or not, the sale of the mutual fund. I could see the answer from Srinivasan who says exempt supplies. What about others? Himanshu says exempt supplies. Abhinav says no. Okay. Am says no. All right. So if you ask me, the sales of mutual fund is an exempt supply. Now, if this is an exempt supply, the another important part which we should understand, look into the rule 42. Rule 42 says clearly, whenever you are doing a taxable as well as the exempt supplies, in that particular case, you have to reverse the common ITC. So if you have purchased something which you have used for the sale of the mutual fund also, in that particular case, you have to correspondingly reverse that ITC. So this is another important part which you, so I will give you one simple example. You purchased a laptop. Laptop would be used for your business purpose. Laptop would have been used for your sale of mutual funds too. Do we have to reverse that ITC? The answer would be yes. So that's the main reason you should understand this part and look into all that PL account carefully. Look into the credit chart, see what is the exempt supply, what is taxable. Maybe from the transaction perspective, we understand anyhow I don't have to pay tax. I will give you another example. Interest on FD. There was an interest on FD. You received interest on the fixed deposit. There was extra money lying. You just deposited into fixed FD, and then there was an interest coming in. But for here, at least for the interest of fixed deposit, I'm on the savior side. I will say I'm safe there because in as per the rule number 42, right? They have excluded interest on the FD for the purpose of reversal as per rule number 42. So at least on the interest on FD, I don't have to do any reversal. We don't have to do any ITC reversal. But there are other items where we have to actually do the reversal part, which we should carefully look into. Similarly, if there was some liability which has to be paid on reverse charge, you have not paid it, better you paid it now. So that accordingly, you can even show that in your GSTR 3B. Right? If there was some B2B invoices which has been wrongly shown as B2CS, you should add that B2B invoice now itself so that the corresponding customer can claim that ITC on top of that. Right? So these are some of the part which we should always understand while we are filing our GSTR 3B, GSTR 1 for the month of October. So in short, if you ask me, if they're pending ITC, claim it now. If there's some amendments to be made, do amendment now. If there's some additions to be made, do that addition now. If there was some ITC which was reversed earlier, and in that case you have not reclaimed that ITC, you should reclaim that ITC now. If there was some exempt and taxable and you have not I would say you have not reversed that common ITC, just do that adjustment now itself. There was reverse charge liability not paid now. If there was ITC claim, you have to claim for that, claim it now, right? So these are some of the points which we should understand. You should also reconcile your 2B with the PR. If there was some ITC reflecting in 2B, not in PR, but you see, okay, I can claim ITC, just claim it. Like example could be bank charges, telephone bills, Wi-Fi bills, right? So you should just claim it now. So these are some points which we should always understand while we are filing 3B and 1, especially for the month of October, because this is the last time for you to claim that ITC which is related to your FY 21-22. Right. So now we'll just take the Q&A. We'll just look into the questions which you have asked. So I will try to answer all of your queries. Sorry. I could see one question is from Brajesh, who's asking, can we claim ITC on insurance premium like car, life insurance, FD and all? So here, Brajesh, see, if you ask me, in general, if you ask me about the insurance premium, you cannot claim ITC. But when it comes to the medical insurance and all, if it is mandated by the law, right? So if it is mandated by the law that you have to take that insurance for the employee, let's say if you remember in the COVID time, right? It was mandated. So if it is mandated, in that particular case, you can always claim the ITC against the same. But if it is not, then you cannot claim ITC on that. Another question from Abhinav, who is asking, e-way bill of inter-branch mistakenly mentioned third-party GSTN in recipient of e-way bill. How to rectify this in e-way bill message? So Abhinav, if okay, and you are saying the time period for cancellation is already gone. So if the time period for the cancellation is gone, then you cannot do anything about it. So there would be a mismatch and we cannot do anything on that particular thing. It's just like while you're filing your GST 1, just make sure you're filing with the correct details. That's the only thing which we can do. And if possible, you can even drop a mail so that for the reference purpose, you know that this was a mistake which has been done. Now another question is from Vijendra, who is asking how to rectify GST 1 when B2B invoice shown in GST 1 in B2B and RCM, whether there is no RCM. Vijendra, you can always give a reference to the original details and you can uncheck the reverse charge while you are filing your GST 1. So that amendment is possible. So you just have to file your B2B A over there. Another question from Srinivasan, who is asking, fixed asset sale, can we reverse that ITC? Yes, again question comes in, you have to look into the rule number 43 and accordingly you have to reverse that ITC. Another question from Rohit, who is asking, invoicing not generated for October 20, if generated in November, will it solve the purpose? See, Rohit, it's always good, like when we should always like raise that invoice, right, the IRN number on the daily basis. We should not wait for the month end. But now, since the time period is already gone, you have not generated, you should generate it now itself. And accordingly, if the recipient also claim that ITC, right, in the month of November, they can always claim it. So I would suggest anyhow, we are on 4th November, better you generate the IDEN for that missed invoices. Another question from Brajesh, who is asking if ITC is showing is bank in the bank statement, but we have not received any invoice from the bank. In that case, can we claim? Yes, in when it comes to the bank, right? Based on the bank statement, you can always claim ITC. We know that there is one also requirement for the possession of the tax invoice as per section 16. But when it comes to the bank, right, for the bank charges, there is one exception to that. So according to that exception, basis that bank statement also you can claim that ITC. Another question from A, who is asking if once the expired e-way bill validity, how can we extend that? So, okay, so you are asking that your e-way bill validity has already been expired. How can I increase that? So, if it is already expired, right, you cannot increase that. But the only way how can you can solve that is you can just raise a delivery challan and give a reference to that original invoice detail and generate the delivery challan from the place where that vehicle is there, and accordingly you can just show that this delivery challan is related to a particular invoice. Another question from Ganesh, who is asking whether RCM self invoice is mandatory only from the unregistered supplier. Umesh, when it comes to the self invoice, right? Yes, it is only for the unregistered supplier. It is not for the registered supplier. Because if you're purchasing from the registered supplier, and even if it is covered under reverse charge, in that particular case, that supplier itself will raise the invoice. You're not going to raise self invoice. So self invoice is only applicable in case you're purchasing from unregistered supplier, but again, not from every unregistered supplier, right? We also have to look into the transactions which are covered under reverse charge. So whatever the transaction which is covered under reverse charge and you are purchasing from an unregistered supplier, there you are required to raise a self invoice. Another question from Ashok, who is asking where to show sales data, negative entry in sales or add with purchase. Ashok, negative entry in sales. So when it comes to the credit note, right, the sales return, you should always show a negative entry in the sales. Another question from Rahul, who is asking when we can claim ITC of a registered RCM at the time of RCM payment or appearing in 2B. So Rahul, when it comes to the reverse charge transaction, it is not dependent on our supplier, irrespective of whether the supplier has shown that in 2B or not. When it comes to claiming the ITC in respect of reverse charge, it is always dependent on you. So in the month when you have shown the reverse charge liability, in the same month you can also claim the ITC. Another question from Monil, who is asking, is RCM self-invoice to be generated mandatory? Yes, you should always generate a reverse charge self-invoice, because that is a document basis that you are claiming the ITC in your GST 3B. So you should always raise the, I would say, reverse charge for self-invoice. Another question is from Krishna, who is asking, I'm doing some share trading as a business income and I'm doing other business also. Is there any impact on ITC? Yes, see, for every transition, right, I would always say you should look into each and every transition, see whether you have to pay any GST on that or not. First, if you have to pay GST, then obviously you are just charging that GST. And if GST is not applicable, then check whether this is covered under the exempt supply or not. If it is covered under the exempt supply, then you have to look into whether there is a common credit. If there is a common credit as per rule number 42 or 43, you should always do the ITC reversal. So all these cases depend from case to case. We always have to look into case to case. Always, whenever you are looking into your books of account, right, from that income side, whatever the income side you have, see for each and every transition, this is your supply or this is not your supply. If it is a supply, whether it's a taxable supply or an exempt supply. And I'm not only saying from the income side. See, many times what happen, I will give you one basic example of a branch transfer, right? When you look into the branch transfer, whenever you're supplying from one GSTN to another GSTN, if you ask me whether that's an income, answer is no. If I'm supplying from one GSTN to another GSTN, that is not my income at all. But from the GST perspective, that is considered as a supply, right? And you also have to pay GST on top of that. So you should always look into each and every transaction very carefully and accordingly see whether it's a supply or not. Once you know that it's a supply or not, then you check whether it's exempt supply or taxable supply. If it is taxable supply, pay the tax on that. If it is not, it is exempted supply. Also check for the ITC part, corresponding ITC, and see whether you have to do any reversal as per 42 or 43 or not. Right? Another question from Rahul, who is asking, if the RCM invoice is showing in 2B, but we have not received the sent invoice, can the GST officer instruct us to pay RCM? See, Rahul, if you ask me, right, if there is some invoice which is coming in your GST 2B as a reverse charge, right, they will always ask. They will always ask whether you have paid that liability or shown the liability in table number 3.1D or not. And if you have not paid, they will ask. But if you can justify that, hey, I have not received this invoice, this is the wrong invoice shown by my supplier, and the best way is you can always raise a grievance. So on the portal there is a way to reject an invoice, so you can always raise a grievance on that invoice, so that even if department comes tomorrow, right, you can always say that this is not the invoice received by me, so accordingly I have not paid any liability on top of that. Right, so I think I was able to answer most of your query, but still I have missed, because I know there were a lot of queries which was coming in and some of the queries just got hidden. So even if I was not able to answer any of your queries, right, you can always mail me at, this is our mail ID. So you can always mail us at gstsupport@cleartax.in. That is our mail ID. Or you can even mail me at surbhi@cleartax.in. That's my mail ID. We'll happy to answer all of your queries over there. And this is also, there's a feedback form which has been circulated, and you would be seeing that on your screen. So I would just request everyone, if you can just take 1 minute and can fill in that form too, so that we also know that what are the topics you are interested in, and accordingly we can just take the session on that topic. And that's it. I think that's the important part, and you can feel free to raise any queries, or maybe if you need PPT or anything, you can just mail us at gstsupport@cleartax.in. With this, thank you very much. Thank you for attending the session.